Good evening. Welcome to Reflections on Granby. Our guest tonight is Squire Bressor, a 30-plus year resident of Granby, 82 years old, and he is our guest this evening. He's going to share his life story with us. My name is Mike Malloy, and I'll be your host this evening. Thank you for joining us. Good to meet you, Squire.
Thank you.
Okay, Squire, we always start out with the basics, which is where you were born. Where were you?
I was born in the Meadow City called Northampton, Massachusetts.
Okay.
Way back quite a few years ago.
1928?
Oh, yes, 1928. We don't want to discuss it too much.
Okay, all right. We already got your age.
1928, and from there, my father was more involved in mental health work and state hospitals and things of that nature. And
okay.
We lived in Vermont for a while, then we came back to Northampton, and I went to the high school, Northampton High, for a couple of years. Then I went to a prep school, a public prep school.
Okay.
For a couple of years up in Vermont, northern Vermont. And believe it or not, people don't realize there's only 4 not public, but they're actually private schools that take some public students, town students maybe and all that.
Okay.
And there's only 4 of them in the whole state of Vermont. Thetford Academy, Burton Academy in Manchester,
okay.
Thetford Academy, Thetford, Vermont, St. Johnsbury Academy, and Linden.
Oh, wow.
And Linden and Johnson are up in the northern part of the state.
Okay, what were your mom and dad's names?
My father's name was Earl.
Okay.
I'm Squire, the son of Earl.
That's
I use
very noble combination.
It's a kidding thing. It's fun to say that.
Yeah, it is.
And my mother, actually, her name was Mary,
okay.
Joke, and she was Polish and French, and father's French, of course, actually.
Okay.
And all that. And we come from French and German stock, my father and his family. And a number of the family still live in Canada, New York State, and Vermont, still at this time.
Yep. Now let me ask you, what are your earliest memories? I mean, if you think back, what is your earliest memory of childhood?
I remember when I was 4 years old, Santa Claus came to the house. I was so scared of him, I ran under the dining room and hid under the table with a big tablecloth.
Okay, that's great.
It's just a curious thing that happens when you're a youngster.
That's an early memory.
Yes, early memory. But what do you mean by?
I'm just wondering. You always have these kind of vague, usually dreamlike memories of your early childhood, some incidents, or what were your impressions of your earliest impressions of living in
Well, I
Northampton?
played sports quite a bit, actually, in high school and prep school. Thank you very much, and I enjoyed it, did well in school. Matter of fact, the reason why I probably went from Northampton High to Linden is because the grades improved, because, you've got your grades improved when you go to private school, a
little more focus.
Yeah. And I did well athletically there, and participate in various activities within there.
Okay.
I did work on tobacco for a couple summers, and that's quite an experience.
Right.
I don't think people realize, a lot of the young kids realize today, working tobacco is it was much different than now.
Right.
It was harder. But that time we did actually around Northampton, Hatfield, and had the area. Tobacco was more or less, not shade tobacco, it was grown tobacco where you had to cut it, the ground, broadleaf, and you had to, the trucks came by, or the tractors, and sometimes they would have horses pulling big wagons.
Right.
You pile it on the flatbeds of and then there were tiers of it. You brought it up to the high tier, in a sense. But one interesting thing is that a lot of the kids nowadays, when they worked in tobacco, they worked for combines. We worked for large farmers who were terrific, the kids. They took us swimming, they provided picnics for us, they provided actually apples and pears and plums and all that, and things like that. That's what they did. They were a little bit more comfortable in doing things for us. And now I talk to some of the kids that work nowadays, they don't have anything of that.
So it was more like a family kind
of... But they had big farms, actually, too. But it was fun. It was sort of fun, but it was hard work.
So this was up in Northampton?
Oh, no, it was in Hatfield, actually, in the area. And, they pick you up early in the morning, pick you up, and then they bring you back and all that sort of stuff. But it was very interesting. But, getting up early in the morning and working, wet and suckering, actually, and you have to put clothes on to keep the moisture off and all that. Well, that was the thing to do.
I grew up in the 70s and early 80s doing that sort of work, and I think that was probably the last generation in this area that actually did that sort of thing. And you're right, it was very hard work. Quite an experience.
I know I was talking to some of the people. Did you know that Martin Luther King actually worked in this area as tobacco?
I believe one of our last guests actually brought that up. Yeah, he
And
stayed in Simsbury, was
Yes, he
yeah,
did.
Yeah.
And he actually attended our church in Simsbury United Methodist
Really?
Church. He did
Wow.
that. And of course, he became a Methodist minister.
Yep.
He went to Boston University and all that.
Sure, that's
See,
amazing. Wow.
But it was interesting that he attended our church and he lived in Simsbury. I don't know how many weeks. I don't know if it was one summer or 2 summers and all. I'm not sure about that, but he was here.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, it's funny how life kind of throws you
Oh,
those
you definitely
connections, and
sense,
you don't
yeah.
know for years later what's happened. But okay, so you grew up in Northampton. You went to school. You went to elementary school and middle school and high school in Northampton.
Elementary, but I also went to school in Vermont.
Oh, that's
but I
right.
Came
You're
back,
right.
came
Okay.
back to Northampton.
But you were still living in Northampton, or you went away?
When I went away to school, I was in Northampton. My parents were living there.
Okay, so you actually you resided on campus.
Yeah,
Yeah,
well,
right.
of course, campus and academy actually. It was,
Right.
it was a good sized school. It's even to this day, it's not awfully big. They do have more women students and town students attend and all that too, actually. And it was more or less like a country boarding day school in a sense. But it was interesting. Tough winters. I remember sometimes getting around campus, we had to use snowshoes.
Oh, really?
Or skis. Sometimes to get around be easier because you had a high campus and a low campus and then another campus. There's 3 levels of it.
Okay.
So it was very interesing actually. But
So going in one direction wasn't too tough.
But I remember at times the snow was so deep up there. Sometimes it got up almost to the lower windows.
Okay.
Because actually that's the way it was. This was back in the 40s, of course.
Not unlike this winter here.
Well, this is a bad winter. This is not a good winter for me.
No.
I enjoy winter. I like to ski.
Right.
I don't do as much actually, but I like to ski and do all those things. But this winter, it got to me.
It was tough.
Not only that, but the ice got to me. Our driveway is a bad driveway, dog leg up.
Right.
A lot of ice, the water, melts, and then the water goes down the driveway.
Yeah.
Oh, what a pain it
Took a
was.
while for that to melt.
Not only that, a lot of ice, and a lot of sand, and a lot of salt.
Yeah. So you grew up between Northampton and your private school. What did you do when you came back to live in Northampton after you?
Afterwards, I went to college for a little while, and then I went in the service. I went in the service, actually, served in Korea and Japan, spent more time in Japan. I worked primarily in the hospitals.
Okay.
My life in the service was, I presume it was easy,
Right.
because I served only in hospitals, see?
Okay.
So therefore, in diagnostic laboratories, which are primarily, diagnostic means primarily work is done, help to fulfill a diagnosis the doctors make,
Right.
like blood chemistry, serology, hematology, and urinalysis and all that.
Right.
And so I served in Japan, in 10th Station and 20th General, and then I went to Guam. That was an experience in Guam.
This was during the active conflict.
Yeah. Guam, I served in Guam, and then after Guam, I stopped off at Tripler General, stayed there for a while, and then I went to Walter Reed in Washington. They want me to stay in the service, and I said no, I wanted to go back to college and all that.
Okay.
And they would offer you all kinds of incentives to stay in and all
Right.
that, but I didn't want to do it.
Okay, so you come back and you go back to college, and what did you pursue in school?
I pursued more or less. I was interested in public health, and in other words, and more or less I thought maybe I'd try and eventually go to medical school and all that. So I was interested in the medical sciences
Okay.
and biological sciences and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So your military training gave you some.
Yeah,
background,
it
right,
helped
right.
actually and all that, sure.
Okay, just jumping back a
Well,
little
of course
bit.
I had the GI Bill too and everything else, and that was great.
Yeah, it was a pretty generous package.
Oh boy,
Yeah, they took care of you.
college life was pretty good because I had the GI Bill. I have a service-connected disability,
Okay.
so I received compensation for that.
Right.
And of course, I played sports in college
Right.
and all that. So, I had a little bit better off than some of the other students because GI Bill, service-connected compensation because of disability. I had
Right.
I worked with communicable disease and what they call chronic disease patients while, being in charge of the laboratory.
Sure.
And I came down with a bad respiratory condition.
Really? Just from being exposed to the things you were testing?
And I had, they worked on my lungs, and I got a scar in both our back just as big as that. Because nowadays, it's probably this way to take care of it. Now, years ago, He had a big scar because they went to the back, opened up the the lungs, go through the rib cage.
Really? So they cut? Yeah, they didn't have the kind of scopes that they
That's
have now
right,
where
not
you
like
can go.
nowadays. So that was done, and so therefore it was considered service connected.
Okay, well, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It didn't affect me in the point of playing sports and all that, but in a way,
Right.
actually, that was to them, they were service connected, which is, I accept it.
You were wounded in action, basically. You were doing your job.
Yeah, I didn't see any action on the front of the
Yeah.
military. I was always in the hospital, see?
Right.
And all that. And there was a nice life, food was good.
Right.
You didn't have the military type of life, actually. When you're in the medical department, there's a difference between medical department and medical corps and all that, see?
Right.
At the type of life, actually, being in the hospitals, it was nicer, easier a little bit.
Okay.
And you didn't have to, all the professional, not professional, but the military things you had to adhere to.
Yeah.
Because seeing all that. So it
A little
was,
different regimen.
Oh, yes,
Yeah, yeah.
definitely. Food was good and all that. The only thing about Guam, temperatures are exceedingly high, and at nighttime it'd be in the 40s, 110 in the day.
Okay, very tropical climate,
Oh.
yeah.
I can remember times when you're on the road, half the road was raining and the other half was dry.
Really?
Peculiar type of monsoons and peculiar rainstorms and all that.
Tropical climates are weird like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
Islands tend to be
Oh,
like
definitely.
that. Yeah. Anytime you
And
get
of course, Guam is, in the southern, southeastern.
Yeah.
It's a Polynesian area down there.
Right.
All that sort of stuff.
It's a pretty big island, isn't
Oh,
it?
yes,
Yeah.
it is Big Island. It's still a territory of United States. I think it's a territory, or whatever else they would call it.
Something.
Something
yeah.
like that.
Territory is
Yeah.
probably correct, yeah.
So they still adhere to the U.S. Everything else in the U.S. helps them a great deal, and they still have, it's a big base,
Right.
military base and all that.
Okay. So you're out of the military, you're back in college, and you're pursuing a career. And where did you go to college?
I went to school for a while in New York State, and then I went to Vermont,
Okay.
and I got a degrees in Vermont, and then I attended Springfield College, got a degree there, and also University of Mass.
Okay. So when you graduated, what was your first job? Where did you go?
My first job actually was eventually in coaching and athletics and things like that. I coached university and collegiate tennis.
Now, how did you segue from your medical direction into? I know there's a physical
Because I
connection.
played competitive tennis while after I got out of
okay.
college, I played competitive tennis.
So yeah.
And I traveled around, competed actually and so on and so forth. That time, competing in tennis is not like nowadays.
No.
They didn't have managers then, and didn't have lawyers, didn't have all equipment and everything else they do now. They weren't giving so many rackets and clothing and everything else like that. It was an entirely different life. And we stayed a lot of times in people's homes.
Okay. So it
And-
was more of a.
It was a good life, but it stayed in
Right.
people's homes. And then when people's homes, a lot of times they drive us to the stadiums and things like that. And we even ate meals with them at times. It's almost like you're part of the family.
So it was more of a community kind of involvement. You were kind of like
I wouldn't say community, but it was, the family thing, because by doing this, it cut down our costs tremendously, because we didn't have expense accounts, and we didn't have sponsors as many like they do now.
Right.
And we didn't have, nowadays the guys get money from endorsing this, endorsing that, and they have all kinds of things like unbelievable.
more of a casual kind of approach.
Oh, more
yeah.
casual.
Yeah.
But we traveled around. We traveled by car, or by train, or by bus, and
How
all
far
that.
did you travel to actually compete?
Oh, I went to Europe.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
While you were in college?
Yeah.
For
No,
competition?
after. This was
Oh, okay.
after.
Oh, okay.
But the thing is this, you realize, at that time you didn't travel by airplane, you went by boat.
Right. It took a while.
5 days. But it was a nice life, and I did it for a while, and then I stopped doing it, and, but I was doing it when I was also coaching the same time.
Okay.
And I had time to do that.
So who was actually your employer at this point? You were
The
doing.
university was.
So you continued to work.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
university were you actually employed?
I did it actually in the Ivy League, and then I did it in the Southeastern Conference School.
Right.
And then I did that for a number of years. And finally, I got fed up with traveling and doing all these things and got tired of it. You get to the point when you're recruit and travel.
Yeah.
You got fed up to here. So I went back to school, and that's when I got the other degrees, actually,
And what were
in
those?
Massachusetts and all that, in Springfield.
What were those degrees actually?
Oh, well, they were mostly actually in public health and biology and all that. And
Okay.
I ended up primarily doing work primarily in teaching and all that, in sports science, sports medicine, actually.
Okay, so you
So
went,
I'm an educator, and since education to me is very important, and
Okay.
it's hard for me to, like students, for example, sometimes they leave school or take 2 or 3 years off, and I try to tell them, please go back and finish up. You don't know how important it is. It may not mean much to you now,
Right.
but several years from now, it's going to be very important. So do finish up.
Right.
And if you can't, at least go part-time, or at least go evening while you're doing your job and all that.
Right.
Because in a lot of these kids, sometimes they leave school and they don't come back.
You're right, yeah. They
But-
get distracted by
Yeah,
worldly.
there's so many, and of course, a lot of them, of course, naturally want to make money.
Right, that's
And
a
of course,
draw.
then it's a little bit easier. Nowadays, some of the kids I take, like kids nowadays, God, some of them go 30, 40, 50, $70,000 in the hole.
Yeah.
They take these loans out and everything else. And
Just getting their bachelor's or, yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And if they want to go to law school, or dental school, or medical school, or even to go to graduate school, if they go to graduate, maybe a year or two masters, then if they want a doctorate, another 3 years or so.
Right.
And even though if you get a fellowship, which helps to pay part of it, and you
Yeah.
do some instructed teaching, there's still a lot of money involved. And some of these kids, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000.
Yeah, before they
Oh.
even make a dime.
And then we didn't have that problem that much years ago.
No, well, there's a lot less overhead in many ways.
Boy,
yeah.
and I hear some of the sad stories. Some of them, they would like to get married. They can't afford to get married.
Yeah.
And things like that, unless their wives have a good job and they work.
Right.
And I've heard of stories where some of these students, for example, they do everything. Sometimes they even after have 2 or 3 jobs, they keep
Yeah.
going.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, they have credit card, even,
Right.
liability cards and all.
Kind of defeats the purpose.
Oh,
sometimes.
yes, very much so.
Yeah. Especially young folks, it's tough to get especially in this economy right now, to get a leg up once you get out of school. So you went on to get your degree, and you went back to teach at where was your first?
I taught actually. I was not a full-time teacher. It was like what you call an adjunct.
Okay.
You're like contractor. You did so much and this and that, and like physiology and things of that nature, and sports science and things of that nature.
So you were drawing on all of your
Oh yeah.
your
My
experience.
background
Yeah,
was
yeah.
used a good deal.
Yeah.
And I got involved in all that, and I still spend a lot of time at University of Mass right now. I go up there sometimes once or twice a week.
So where was your first teaching position?
Well, I did some, for example, actually, in other words, at Vermont. I did some actually, a little bit at Westfield.
Westfield State.
West State.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a Westfield State College, it's Westfield State University.
Okay.
You know what they did here
What?
last year?
What's that?
All the state colleges in Massachusetts now become become state universities.
Really?
Yeah.
So they made them all part of the same system.
Yeah. Well, it's not. It's your state universities. It's separate from the really, like University of Mass at Amherst,
Yep.
the medical school, Lowell. Let's see, and what is it? Those are the state universities, actually.
Right.
The others are state colleges, which became like Westfield State Universities, Bridgewater State University, Bridgewater, Fitchburg State University, Stanley University, and all that.
Okay.
But those are the universities, but still the main school in the whole regime is the University of Mass, is the flagship school.
In Amherst.
In Amherst, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And then there's one in medical schools in Worcester.
So did they structurally tie them all together in a different way, or they
Yeah,
just
they're different. The
changed?
university system is different than the college system.
Okay. All right.
But that doesn't change. A lot of these state colleges became universities. Doesn't change much, and probably in name only, and maybe cost them more for logos, for banners,
Right.
and it doesn't affect the faculty much and all that sort
Or
of
the
stuff. But
curriculum.
apparently they did this, and then they started last year for the first time in Massachusetts a public university law school. They never had a law school, public law school in Massachusetts.
Oh, really?
They have six.
Okay.
They have about 7 law schools.
Right.
But they
Very prestigious
Yeah.
ones. Yeah.
Oh, definitely
Yeah,
prestigious.
yeah.
And so the first law school is at Dartmouth. University of Mass at Dartmouth, which
Oh,
is
no
going towards the Cape.
Yeah, right.
that's
So
right.
they incorporated that, or they?
Yeah, they
could-
tried. Well,
That was-
it's separately, but it's at Dartmouth grounds on the campus.
on the Dartmouth University.
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. Wow. So there's a lot of changes have been
Oh,
going on
yeah.
in the education.
And of course, just like Connecticut, people don't realize one time Central Connecticut, Southern, and Western, and Eastern were all state colleges. Now they're state universities.
Right.
And now the
Now,
flag.
explain that you've been, very involved in this. What's the reasoning behind that, and what is?
Not really. I think it's probably helped them actually all the way around. It gives them a little bit more prestigious, gives them other things a little bit better in the world, for example, in a world of colleges, more
Right.
prestige all the way around.
Right.
And of course, now that there's another thing that happens a great deal when you become a state university. It opens the doors for a lot more things, a lot more students and all that. Just like at University of Mass is considered one of the best values for a youngster to go to school
Right.
in New England.
Yeah.
And do you know the Westfield State University is the same thing, one of the best values for the cost.
Curriculum versus cost versus your end result.
That's right. Yeah. Well, that's the name of the game.
Yeah, you're trying to balance as best you can. Now, what would you say? Just give our viewers a quick definition of the difference between college and university. I mean, I know you.
Well, colleges don't have all the various departments, don't have all the various schools and things like that. And most or less colleges have a tendency to be more liberal arts, economics, business, and things like that.
You can't pursue higher
That's
education.
it. They don't have as many degrees and things like many master's degrees, not too many, and a lot of them don't even have doctorates actually.
Right.
But a university has all that, like University of Mass or UConn.
Right.
They have probably, you have a lot of students. University of Mass has roughly about 30,000 students.
So the extent of the curriculum becomes more comprehensive.
And you take like some of the schools when you're in university, you apply actually to research work.
Okay.
University of Mass actually is one of the largest in the eastern United States for research work. They get a lot of grant money from the government, from private sources to do research work and all that.
Okay. So just jumping back to your life, where were you living at the time when you finally settled?
I lived in New York State, I lived in Vermont, I lived in Amherst, I lived actually, places like that. I lived in...
So you followed your job.
Yeah. And then, of course, we got married. I got married in the 60s.
Where'd you meet your wife?
Through politics.
Really?
I got involved with politics in Springfield.
Really? You were living in Springfield?
Yeah, we lived in Springfield.
Interesting, okay.
Yeah, I got involved.
It's quite a political scene there. It still is.
Well, I was active in, do I dare say, Republican politics?
No, you can say whatever you like. Yeah. No, that's it. That's, basically, I think a lot of what we're trying to do is just get a picture of you, and that's great. So.
I involved in Republican politics and all that. I was young Republican chairman of Greater Springfield.
Really?
Yeah. And I worked for the campaigns.
That must have been a minority party in Springfield at the time.
Not really. Yeah, more
Yeah.
minority, but there was still we were very active and the Republican Party was active, much more so then than is now.
Okay.
And I worked in various
Really?
campaigns. Ed Brooks' campaign, he became senator, actually. Volpe's thing, remember?
Okay, and
Remember
the name
Volpe?
sounds
Yeah,
familiar.
and all that sort of stuff. And I was involved in the governor's council and all that sort of stuff. And
So your wife was involved in politics also?
politics, I met her in politics, and she was very big in like public relations and marketing and all that sort of stuff. And
So she was employed by some political...
oh no, she
Oh,
worked.
she
at Mass
worked-
Mutual.
that
time
was
she
her job.
working- yeah,
Okay, all right,
she worked
right.
at Mass Mutual that time.
So she was just locally involved, and you met her that way.
The same thing all of us, a lot of us do. We do this volunteer.
Yeah.
You don't get paid. You just get food and transportation maybe and all this other thing, but you didn't get paid. But that's
And you
just
met a
something you
wife.
do. Yeah.
That's a pretty good deal.
Well, I'll tell you some interesting things actually by being involved in politics. I mean, young Republican chairman.
Yeah.
We had a lot of Smith College girls, Mount Holyoke College girls, and many
Okay.
other schools, and they wanted to come and get involved in grassroots work and politics and everything else.
Right.
That's great for young bachelors.
For a young
Oh,
why
boy.
not? Right. How old were you at the time, approximately?
I'd say early 30s probably.
Okay, so you were getting to the point where you're thinking about settling down. You met a nice lady, and you got married.
Yeah.
Okay, did you stay in Springfield after you got married? Where'd you go from there?
We stayed in Springfield and everything else. Then eventually we came to, what we did actually is the sense that we came down here because Carol accepted the position at Hartford Hospital.
As a public relations?
Director of Public Relations and Marketing and all
Okay.
that. She accepted that. And it was easier for her to travel to Hartford Hospital. Women don't like to drive too much to go to work. They won't drive 100 miles a day.
Especially if they're
All
going to have kids.
We don't have any children.
Oh, okay, all right.
Never did. And the thing is this, they don't like to travel.
Right.
Men will travel, 100 miles a day, 150 miles a day for their jobs and
Yeah.
all that. But women, I think if women have to drive more than 40 miles a day to their jobs, that's more than enough.
That's a good point. I don't know many women that commute long distances to work.
If you ask around, you find out a lot of
That's
them
an
don't
interesting
like to.
observation.
And I've asked a number of women just for the sense of actually of interest. Number of women, what do you do and how far do you travel? Would you travel 100 miles a day? Preferably not.
So you've done a little case study on your own. Yeah. It's interesting because I do, now that you mention it, I know several men that regularly commute to New York from this area and stay down there.
I know several men used to from here go all the way to White Plains.
Which is.
And I've known men in Greenfield go all the way to Electric Boat.
Right.
Things like that,
Not many women do that.
And then, of course, you see men, their families, for example, the man may work in Boston, the wife may work in Washington, D.C.
Okay. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And they see each other on weekends.
There's exceptions, but by far, you're absolutely right. Okay, so your wife got the job, and where did you move to get closer to
We moved
them?
to West Granby.
Okay, so
we were looking for homes. We looked at homes in Granville. We looked at homes over in Tolland.
Right.
All over, and we finally found a place on Simsbury Road.
Okay, well, this is a good time to segue into your impressions of Granby. When you first came to Granby, what was your first impression of the town?
It was more or less, shall we say, maybe a rural suburban town.
Okay.
Now I call this completely suburbia. For years. I'd say Granby in the last 25 years, complete suburbia. People sometimes say to you, where do you live? I live in suburbia. I don't live in rural. Maybe to them they think rural. For example, you ask a person, where do you come from? And where do you live? They said, I live out in the country. Where? And he says, I live in Newark, New Jersey, or something like that. See, to them it's country. They don't consider this.
Yeah. It's all relative to your own experience. If you grew up in the Northampton Valley up there, that's very, very rural. You get into Hatfield.
No, that's suburbia.
We get into Hatfield and some of those small.
Way past Hatfield. If you go way from Hatfield, because Hatfield and Hadley and Amherst and South Hadley and all those places, that's suburbia. Because most of the people that live there work someplace else. And to me, if you work someplace else, that's suburbia. If you live off the land, if you and things of that nature, or if you do a lot of commuting, you're in suburbia.
Well, if you commute regularly, that's a definition of a suburb, right?
Yeah.
And that's okay. So was there any other observations or impressions
about Granby?
When you first came to town.
Well, we liked the town and all that. It was small that time. At that time, back in the 70s, I don't think the Granby was much more than 7,000 people or so.
Okay.
Granby's never grown that big. Now I think we're at 11.7, 11.8.
Sounds about right.
Somewhere around now. Yeah. But that time it wasn't very big.
It's a 50% increase, but it's not a huge
And I got involved in town with Parks and Rec Board, and I helped to build Summerbrook Park.
Okay.
At that time, and the guy who built the tennis courts in Summerbrook Park lived at our house.
Okay.
In other words, the contractor did.
Really? So you lodged the contractor.
Well, they helped them, and they helped to build the park and all that sort of stuff. And of course, the park actually, the money came from federal funds. Part of the park actually.
Yeah, most construction projects like that are a variety of different funds. So you had now. What was your impressions? You didn't have any children in the school system, but what was your impression of the infrastructure at the time? Where there was what did you think was the most?
Well, the first time in the school system wasn't that. They struggled a little bit.
There were some difficulties.
Yeah. And when they started building, for example, the campus-style high school.
Right.
We were against that actually. And we thought maybe they would form a regional school system with East Granby and Heartland and all that, which would I think would have probably been the best idea.
Right.
But then at that time, the hierarchy of people and all that felt the best thing to do was have their own school system. So they kept it that way.
Yeah, they did. They made a lot of changes. But
they had to eventually had to get rid of the campus-style high school and go to what it is now.
Were you involved in that process, being an educator? You never.
My wife got involved actually. She helped to choose like the superintendent of the schools. She was on the committee and various other things like that. I didn't get involved that much actually in a sense, but I was always involved in Granby in various ways at Historical Society. The Granby Parks and Rec Board. I was on the Republican Town Committee.
Okay.
Involved with other things, actually, in a sense, in town, and all that. And so primarily I got interested in that, combined
Yeah.
with what I do. And also that time after, I also had a little business called Squire's Tennis and Ski.
Okay.
And we dealt mostly with parks and rec programs and schools and colleges, to them primarily.
Right.
And it was located, partly from my home or from there, and also in Holyoke, Mass, actually.
Okay.
So,
Where do you actually live in Granby?
West Granby,
What?
Simsbury Road.
Okay, so you're pretty far out there.
It's from our house to the center of town is a little over 4 miles.
It's a pretty area out there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of developments occurred out there in the last.
Well, actually, Simsbury Road, for example, is a shortcut for people going to Heartland and all that.
Right.
You take the road from where Antonio's is.
Yep.
And they go up that road, and that becomes County Road, and eventually County Road comes down, eventually through the gully and all that, and you get through, after you get through the gully, then you come to Barndoor Hills and Simsbury Road, and Simsbury Road goes all the way up there, it goes by the West Granby Methodist Church, Holcomb Farm, and all that.
Pretty
right
area.
Right up to Route 20. You'd be surprised how many people take that shortcut.
Yeah.
And we got a lot of people actually that do that. And of course, it
cuts out a lot of real estate if you're going south. Yeah.
Another thing it does, it's what they call a bus route.
Okay.
So they take pretty good, decent care of the road and plowing it because it's a bus route.
It's got to be
gotta be
appropriate for
Yeah.
that travel. Yeah.
And all that. So, and of course, naturally, a lot of the property, like our property, abuts the game refuge.
Okay.
2/3 of our property covers on the game refuge, a little bit south of us, and so sort of almost.
I don't think most people realize how big that really is.
Oh, McLean's is good size.
It's a massive piece of real estate.
But the funny thing about it, actually, it's not like like square.
No, it's all.
It goes like this,
Yeah.
fingers in there and all that, just like a next door neighbor. His property, he's got quite a bit of acreage that he donated some of it to the Granby Trust.
Okay.
But I looked at his land; it goes like this, like this, like this.
Oh yeah,
that's very funny.
Now, are all the parcels that are part of the game preserve? Are they all connected? I mean,
No,
there are some.
Ours joins it actually.
Yeah.
Ours joins it, and then the other side is our neighbor. He has his property
Okay.
on the more northwest side, actually. So
Right.
So we're protected more or less by the game refuge. It's an ideal.
Using your frame of reference of 30 plus years, what do you think the biggest changes have been in Granby, other than you mentioned the population? What is anything else that kind of?
I think the school system's improved tremendously.
Okay, yep.
That is a big thing, and I think that's one of the reasons more people have decided to come here, actually, in a sense. Our biggest problem, we don't have any industry, we don't have any commercial outlets and all that, and that's not going to help the tax base.
No.
As you know, the property owners of this town have to primarily fork the money over to take care of everything there is.
They shoulder the burden.
Oh, they do primarily. We have an industrial park, but it's nothing much down there. And, we look at East Granby and some of these places. East Granby, I was talking to a friend of mine in town the other day. He says, East Granby is so fortunate. They have all this land. They have all this property. They have all these businesses, everything else and all that. Yet, wouldn't it be nice if we had some of that too? But unfortunately, we don't.
Well, we split 120 years or 150 years ago, so.
Oh, yeah.
That was the break.
Yeah.
But, no, I think Granby's a little bit in a disadvantage because there's not a real highway that runs through it. So
that's one thing. It's not a big truck route where you have major trucks coming through. It's not on. We don't have a railroad line. We don't have a bus line. All that. Although the buses do come out from Hartford, but that's only 2 or 3 or 4 a day.
Yeah.
And the commuters and all that sort of stuff. So we don't have a lot in the sense. So it's a suburban town where everybody in this town has to commute, has to drive in every place where they want to go.
Right, and you have to pay for all your services locally. Yeah.
And of course, we do have Holcomb Farm. We do have a lot of nice vegetable farmers, or what do you call the farmers who grow their own and sell?
Yeah, local farm.
Yeah.
And there's
Markets.
a lot. Yeah, we've discussed that. There seems to be a real density of that in
Yeah.
Granby. Yeah.
What's good because people don't want to buy vegetables and stuff like that at the various large stores. They can go in the various. There's a number of them in town who have markets like that, and of course we still have, I guess, Saturday mornings. Don't they have the farmers market up in around the high school, someplace like that.
Yeah, I've never done it. Yeah.
Then Holcomb Farm does a lot of donations of food to the senior center
Yep.
and various other places.
They have their farming cooperative up
That's
there.
right.
Yeah.
They have that big co-op, which is something that a lot of towns don't have.
Oh, it's a beautiful town.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of that you pay for it, but there's a lot of character to this town.
We are
It's
very
unique.
supportive of Holcomb Farm. We do
Yeah.
things up there, not a lot, but they have progressive dinners, and I guess Friday night they had a fundraising folk guitarist. Actually, they're constantly doing things to raise money.
Yeah,
to
they-
keep the place going.
Right.
And it's unique in a sense because they do so much more in the community, and they get the community involved and all that, and the various things. They have their big bicycle. Once a year, people bring all the bicycles, and they and they send the bicycles to Appalachia, the Caribbean, South America. There are stories they tell me. Some of the people get these bicycles. That's the only way they get around. If they have to go to school, they travel 7 or 8 miles on a bicycle just to get to school. You know, rural, very rural in some of the places. and all that.
Yeah. So just in your life, so at this point you're still teaching at UMass. Is that what you're?
Somewhat, actually. You know.
Not right now. I'm talking about when you moved to this town and for the first 20
I was
or so.
some involved with the University of Mass, and,
Okay.
then I was involved actually in the business of Squires tennis and ski and all that.
Okay, so that was a
kept
going
time actually
concern.
in there and all that sort of stuff. And then a number of years ago, I just decided to give that up primarily, and that was the end of that. So,
Okay.
but I still involved. I got involved in various activities like I'm on various boards and committees at Westfield State University. I'm involved with Elms College. In a sense, I'm part Polish on my mother's
Okay.
side,
Yep.
and they got me on the board up there because we established the Polish Center for Discovery and Learning at Elms
Okay.
College.
Yeah.
And we took a building over, got a lease for 99 years, and we built the building up. It was a big, beautiful building, which was part of the, I think, part of the Springfield Diocese, actually.
Okay.
And what we did, we raised money and all that so we can put a sprinkler system in and put an elevator in. You put actually a lot of other things, spent $450,000. And it's as a research center for genealogy, with a library for research.
Well, there's a large Polish population in the area. That's quite a resource.
Yeah, around Chicopee and Northampton and Ludlow and Indian Orchard and Northampton and Turner's Falls, Greenfield is a lot, and all that sort of stuff. Just like down here, you go to New Britain and Wethersfield, Newington, Hartford. There's a lot in there, and so I got involved with that. And then University of Mass years ago, we got some money from a special fund. So we have an endowed chair for Polish and Slavic studies.
Oh, fascinating.
And we're one of probably 5, 6 schools that have that. There are schools that teach Slavic and Polish studies, but not endowed chair for Polish studies,
Okay.
Slavic studies. Harvard has one, Columbia has one, University of Virginia, Central Connecticut, University of Mass, and there's one other school. I forget which one it is. I'm having a junior moment.
Okay, well, we're waiting on it.
and so they do that. So that's involvement in that. And I'm involved, for example, with like National Football Foundation, College Hall of Fame.
Okay.
I've been involved with that years because in football.
Yep.
I'm involved as actually with a.
Did you play football in college?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't
I
just tennis.
Dislocated my shoulder a number of times and all
Yeah,
that.
that beats you up.
I punted and I was a end actually in college. And all
Okay.
that. And then I got involved with the Winter Olympic program.
Oh, cool.
So involved with that. So I a little bit involved with that. And then I'm involved over the years. I've competed in the Senior Games and Senior Olympics.
Good for you.
In Massachusetts, Connecticut, and I've gone to the Senior Olympics wherever we held. Once every 2 years they go to different parts of the country. So
Stayed very active.
yeah.
Yeah.
Played badminton and tennis, and I enjoy field events. In other words, track events. I still practice once in a while with my javelin. I love to throw the javelin.
Oh, really? Yeah.
And
yeah.
discus too.
That's a very unique sport.
Yeah, and I enjoy that. So during the summer and springtime, I'll go out whenever I can because you have to practice this because it's it's not the same repetition over again, but technique is so important.
Okay.
Oh,
Yeah.
people don't realize the technique in there.
A little focus
I don't have the
involved.
strength and all that, but you don't need strength a lot of times. You know, technique and going through the process, repetition, and doing it right and all that. So
Okay.
I enjoy that. So
I know you were a little under the weather last couple of weeks, and when I called you, you were pretty disturbed at your
unfortunately,
inability to.
I discovered that there were periods there that I have a loss of vision in my left eye.
Yep.
Anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes to 25 minutes. And I knew it was lack of blood. There's a lot of other things, but I figured it was blood.
Right.
So my little background I have in there.
Yeah, yeah.
And I went to the ophthalmologist right away, and he did the study in the eye and everything else. He says, the eye is okay, but you've got a problem. You better go have some ultrasound and echograms or what's the other one? Not MRI, but
CAT scan?
CAT scan,
Yeah.
right. And we did that, and we found out that my carotid was
Okay.
pretty well closed. In other words, I had a plaque buildup with platelets,
Yep.
and it was restricting my blood flow, and you could see it. We saw it on the computer and everything else and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. So it's
And he
fortunate
said,
they
you
caught it.
better have it as soon as possible,
Okay.
have surgery done on this thing.
Yeah.
And of course, we plan on going to Europe, and he says, you better do it even before you go to Europe.
Yeah.
And after the surgery last week, I went in earlier this week actually, and I saw the computer, everything else, and pictures, and there was blood flow was completely clear, and it was really fantastic.
Okay, they opened you right up.
And they said my color of my face is a little bit more
A little more.
more so.
Oh, good for you, yeah.
Excessive actually. So.
Well, you're the picture of health, but it's amazing. You never know when those things are creeping up on you. It's a good.
Well, that was the only way to find out is because of
Strange,
loss
huh?
vision.
Yeah.
You know, for 5, 10 minutes to 25 minutes.
Right. Your peripheral stuff starts to.
And it affect me on tennis. I noticed, for example, the last number of months now, I couldn't see the ball as clear.
Okay.
Things like that. And of course, naturally, a lot of times people say if it doesn't clear, why don't you get glasses, a little bit distance glasses or things
Right.
like that, help to clear it all that. And of course, I'm vain. I only use reading glasses and driving glasses,
Right.
Just to make it clear when you drive.
Yeah.
And sometimes I don't even use the driving glasses that much. If it doesn't bother me, I don't use them.
Right.
And so that's something that people don't realize. Health is so important.
Yeah.
I push the people, being in the sports science field, that as you get older, please take care of your body.
Right.
Do whatever you have to do. As you get older, it's important that you're in physical shape.
Right.
You have muscle tone. You have all this. If you get older, do Tai Chi, do yoga, things of that
Anything to
nature.
stay limber and
Do
keep you-
flexible exercises, stretching exercise. You've got to do these things,
Okay,
actually.
yeah.
And watch what you eat.
Okay, you had mentioned at one point you had the Squire's
College of Knowledge.
College of Knowledge. What was that all about?
They did a study at the university, and they found out that a lot of senior men, men over 60 and all that,
Right.
they don't read books. They don't
Okay.
read novels and things of that nature.
Yep.
And they found out that they do read newspapers, they read magazines, and they probably watch TV. So therefore, I concocted the idea, why don't I start a little program, Squire's College of Knowledge? So I get a little talks and all that, and in the end of the program, I bring a bunch of books, I ask questions.
Okay.
And who answers the question raises his hand. He's got to raise his hand,
Yep.
and he's got to answer the question. He answers the question, he gets a chance of the books. He has to choose the books on the table.
Okay.
And I always get books. I have plenty of books at home. I
Right.
always get books very easily. Some are given to me. Some I pay, not very expensive or so.
Okay.
And I love doing it because
Right.
if men do this, maybe the knowledge they obtain. It's like it's
So you
like
focus
a
on
voyage.
men,
Yeah,
because they tend to
women
stay-
and
yeah.
men, but mostly
Okay,
men.
okay.
And I go to programs actually like up in Chicopee and other places where there's women too, and
Yeah,
that's great. But the thing is this, that
kick 'em out.
they don't read enough books.
Right.
The knowledge you get, it's like going on an adventure, reading a book and learning something and communicating. And I hope that they will give the book to another person.
Okay.
And if they don't, maybe they want to donate to the library.
So
If
it's an ongoing program that you do, yeah.
And on this, if they donate library, maybe they'll give it to a nursing home or rest home or places like that. So don't waste books.
Right.
And we do waste books in this country.
Yeah.
If you go to some of these library book sales, if they're not sold, sometimes the dumpsters out there is full of books.
Right.
Oh, I hate that. I just like it so much.
Well, you've had such a fulfilling life based on knowledge,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you want to share that. But it's the extension also of what you're talking about, your physical health. You keep that alive, and you want to complement
And I
that
push
with
that for adults and periods, actually. In other words, you try, like in sports science, sports medicine, you promote as much health as possible. And I don't know, I'm shall we say, epitome of all this, but I try to tell people, let's work on this. Let's do something about it. If you have problems physically, there are things you can do to help and make it easier for you,
Right.
and make it easier for your life later on.
Absolutely.
And you don't want to be a burden probably on your children as much, or maybe a burden on the community, a burden on a lot of other things. You can do a lot to help yourself.
Yeah, sure.
Of course, on the other hand, you could have a lot of physical ailments and all that, and that's a different story.
A lot of those are habits, don't you think? I mean, once you establish them, they become part of your
good.
life,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah,
really the
yeah.
key. I mean, you've started out on that road, and you've stayed on it, and you're sharing it with other people.
I've never been really ill at all, except fractures in the leg and arms and dislocations
Right.
and all that from sports and all that.
Right.
Teeth knocked out.
Yeah, well, those are good illnesses.
Years ago, when you played sports,
you didn't have a helmet.
The teeth actually would be chipped and broken up and all that. And what they do, they save as much as they can, and then they pull them.
Yeah.
I only have 8 teeth in my mouth now. The rest are either dentures or either partial.
Much simpler dentistry.
Nowadays, I'm going to a dentist now,
He's trying
and they're
to
crowning everything else.
trying
and
to
they're
save
doing
your
this.
8 teeth.
Oh, they're doing it. And then they're trying to convince me I should have new partial, a new up denture.
Right.
A lot of money.
Yeah, it's very expensive. Well, at least you only have 8 to work on, so that's good. That's a good start.
And of course, dentures and teeth are very important because you've got to chew, you got to tear, you got
Yes.
to grind,
You gotta
and you
eat.
need nutrition.
Yes, absolutely.
And I found out I had shingles back several years ago.
Okay.
And I found out shingles actually affected my taste buds. I don't enjoy food as much years ago.
Oh.
Now I graze.
That helps keep your weight down. Right?
4 or 5, small meals a day.
Yeah.
I graze.
Yeah.
I don't enjoy big meals anymore.
Yeah, well, I guess age brings a variety of different changes to us. You know?
Well, also, health and various other things like that. But, you drink a lot of fluids, not so much water. I don't, you don't have to drink 8 or 10 or 12 cups of
That's
water.
what I've been told. Yeah.
You have water through watermelon, cantaloupe, grapes, juices, and all that. There's your water.
A lot of
right
different
there.
ways to stay hydrated.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, just jumping back real quick. If you were to, I'm going to go through a couple quick questions with you about Granby. What I asked you what the biggest change. What's the best change you think? And I mean, maybe it was something I already said.
Well, it's hard to say. I know the government in town, the government actually has done an awful lot. We have a very well, selectmen's board and board of education and board of finance. My wife was involved with board of finance for many years and all that, and they've done an awful lot in this town. They've been able to keep the tax rate down and all that, better than some other towns around here are hurting. But Granby has done pretty well.
Pretty well run.
Yeah. So I think it's well run, and that makes a lot of difference. And
Yeah, that's reflected in the community. I think it's a very stable place. What if there was? This is a kind of a side question. What if there was one thing you could do if Squire had his magic wand? If there's one thing you could do for the town of Granby? What would it be? Assuming you didn't have to pay to keep it up after you did it, because that's always a challenge. But is there anything that you think that would be nice to have in town, or anything?
Well, of course, we've got to improve actually Summerbrook Park a great deal, and because that's a need for the future. More places for the youngsters in town. We don't have a lot of places for youngsters to go to. And we do have a senior center and youth center. It's not used enough. We have to use the buildings in this town more so. Not just use them 7, 8 months a year.
So would it be programmatic is what you
More
would do?
programs
Yeah, okay.
for adults, more programs for the juniors, and find places for them to
Interesting.
take things after school and things like that. Sure. I think we have to improve our recreational facilities and things of that nature so people have places to go, things they can do not only for themselves but their families.
Okay.
I think the school system is good as long as we keep our school system where it is now or whatever it can in the future. That's very important because we're still a small town.
It's a challenge.
It's, we 11,700, 11,800, 11,800, and we've got to still try to get people to come into town. And we've also got to try to find something more in probably homes or apartments or things of that nature for the young couples, young families. We've got to do
Affordable
that.
housing.
Yes,
So,
affordable housing.
That's a
We
challenge.
don't have much like that in town.
Granby, it's a fairly expensive place to live. Yeah.
And I think those are the things. And of course, it'd be great if we can get some business and commercial businesses tremendous.
Okay. Yeah.
And that's not easy. And it's.
Is there any one business you'd like to see? Any one retail?
Oh, yeah. I would like to see a diner or something like
Okay.
that where there's a young lady in town, actually, who bought a diner in New
I
Hampshire.
remember, yeah. She planted it.
And she planned on having it down there in the
Yep.
back of the post office. And now it's sitting in North Granby for the last 3 years on blocks up there.
Okay.
And I don't know if she's ever going to be able to do it.
So you'd like to see that come?
Oh, I'd like
yeah.
to see. We don't have it. We have pizza places. We have some restaurant, but it'd be nice to have a diner where you can go in. That not only a diner, but also have an addition to it, like maybe a little banquet or something like.
Right.
Where you can get $7, $8, $9 meals at nighttime.
Right.
And a nice spot, for example, to eat. It doesn't have to be booths. It could be tables and all that. So you can have a family thing, and you can communicate, enjoy meeting other people and all that.
Right.
I think it'd be great to have
A
something
community
like that.
center
Yeah.
in some ways.
And we don't
yeah.
have that.
Yeah,
See?
right.
And of course, you said we don't have a lot of commercial businesses in town. Not like other towns. We're
Yeah.
not like Simsbury or Avon.
Yeah.
Sometimes you look at them, look what they have.
To be fair, I think you've in Granby have managed the move in that direction. It would have been real easy to just throw the gates wide open and allow all sorts of development, but you seem to have managed it quite well.
Oh, the Planning and Zoning Board,
Yeah.
and I think we've done pretty good in this town in managing those things,
Yeah.
keeping it that way.
Yeah.
And there's, of course, it's not easy. You try to, development has got to the board's got to do a little bit more and try to entice some businesses to come in, maybe give them tax breaks, things of that nature. In this state,
It's a
the
challenge.
state does not support small businesses.
It's a challenge. It really
And
is.
that hurts me tremendously.
Yeah.
I hear about some of my friends actually have small businesses, and
Yeah.
they say, God, we'd leave this area actually if we could, but our real estate and everything else would be too much. The cost of actually relocation is too much. It just can't do.
It's a challenge. I'm a small
But they would
business owner.
leave.
and
They
I
would
can do it.
leave. They would
Yeah.
go to South Carolina or wherever else actually
Yeah.
do it, and some of their employees would go with them. They're not business big. 30, 35, 40 maybe.
It's also a double-edged sword. There's a lot of money in this area too. So
Oh, yeah.
it's attractive to have your business here, but there's definitely things that can be done.
We're living in an affluent area.
Yeah.
Avon, Simsbury, Granby. I don't think Granby is affluent as Simsbury or Avon or Farmington or those towns, but
No.
we're still affluent in a
Yeah,
way.
there's parts of town that are.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so just one last question. If you were to give advice to young people growing up today, if you could summarize your 82 years of wisdom and education and living and athletics, what would it be? What if you were to say, if you had 30 seconds to give?
If you have the opportunity to finish your education and go to school and actually do these things because it's going to enhance your life later on. It's
Okay.
very important that you do. If you have the opportunity, get it. If you can't go, at least go for a year or two, make some money, and go back to school.
Okay.
Because some of the kids nowadays just can't do it in 4 or 5 years.
Right.
But do it because your education is our future. The
Yeah.
kids are our future. We have a lot to gain in this country, and this is a great country to live in. And I tell people, when I pass away, I want a type of, shall we say, artistic type of memorial.
Okay.
And I want to use the Four Seasons, the things like string quartet. I want them to play America the Beautiful.
That's a great way to go
Because
out.
I'm
Yeah.
I think this country is great. It gave me an awful lot, and I'm telling you, I'm very patriotic.
You're a
Sometimes
passionate
when I see
patriot.
when they sing them, Star Spangled Banner, sometimes I get a little bit emotional.
Yeah,
To me, it is because of the time of the service and all that.
Absolutely.
Although I don't push the service days.
Yeah.
Some of the people the other day, you were in the service? We never knew that. You did this. We never knew that.
Well, you're an impressive citizen, Squire.
Oh, I don't. I'm
it's
impressive.
I know you don't want too many compliments, but anyway, I have it's been a pleasure. We could probably talk for hours here. I can see you're definitely fascinating.
I don't know, I'm fascinating. I do whatever I can, do whatever I have to do on this earth
Yep.
to do something, contribute something in some small way.
We're glad you came on our
I
program.
do. I appreciate it very much
All
and
right,
all
thank
that. I
you.
enjoyed it and all that. Don't forget your book. I brought your book.
I'm not going to leave it there.
Yeah.
Okay.
So-
We'd like to thank you for joining us and our guest, L. Squire Bressor, a resident of Granby for 30-plus years, and hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as we do, as much as I did. You can view this online on gctv16.org or regular programming on Friday and Thursday nights, and we appreciate you joining us once again. Have a nice night.